Hello and a big warm welcome back to the Health and Safety Digest, a special podcast by Astutis. And as ever, I am your host, your guide on this voyage of health, safety and environmental training, digital content writer at Astutis, Toby Howell. And today I am absolutely delighted to say that we have a NEBOSH exam special with Astutis Technical Director Brenig Moore, where we will be discussing in this specific episode revision tips, exam guidance and how to maximise your virtual training. So without further ado, let's jump straight into our chat with Bren. And we're delighted to be joined by Astutis Technical Director Brenig Moore, who's here to take us through those exam questions. Brenig, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Toby.
And my first question for you today is, as ever, how are we?
I'm splendid, thanks. And you?
Oh, I'm delighted, especially more that you have joined the Health and Safety Digest. And it's a very, very important episode because, of course, today we are looking through the kind of most frequently asked questions that we get from our learners regarding especially NEBOSH examinations and assessments. So let's just get started if we may. And we all know that, exams are a tricky topic that involve a substantial amount of understanding and understanding what works for the learner, for the individual learner. And different learners have their own methods of revision, etc. But if we could begin with you, Bren, what is your personal approach to exam preparation?
Okay, you make a good point there, Toby, that everybody is different, and certainly my approach has evolved significantly over the years. I am very much a lifelong learner, but the way I study nowadays is very, very different to the way I would have studied for my O levels and A levels, for example. So I've learned a lot about how to learn, and I've refined my approach quite a bit along the way. I think for me nowadays, the key really is planning and preparation. I think the first thing that anyone should get their head around really is how much time are they going to need to invest in studying, and to lay out an appropriate study plan to help them to get through that material in a timely manner. Not hurrying, taking the time to work through the content, taking the time to think about what stuff actually means, relating theory to practice, doing some learning through doing by getting involved back in the workplace. And if you spend some time studying risk assessment, studying incident investigation on your course, for example, probably the best way of consolidating that learning and getting a real deep understanding is by going out on site and seeing if you can get practically involved in these processes, and that makes it much more real for the learner. Once you're happy that you've got a good level of understanding, I think there are probably a few other things that are worth planning for, worth covering along the way. Important to know, what the assessment is going to look like, what you're actually preparing for. So I think it's important to get your head around the nature of the assessment before you start committing serious effort into studying. Know your enemy, very much know what you are preparing for. And then I guess the final sort of comment from me would be about revision. So I've gone through the learning process. I've spent quality time working through the content, thinking about what the content really means in practice, getting stuck in some real application. I know that stuff now, and now I'm getting ready for an assessment. That first part of the learning process is all very much about getting the outside in, is the phrase I use. It's getting that information into the grey matter and making sense of it. And a lot of learners, once they've made sense of it and they're happy that they've got that understanding, they do no more. But when you go into the exam, you've got to pull it back out again, and you've got to explain it to somebody else. most importantly the examiner, in a way that's going to make sense to the examiner. So I'd factor that into my planning and my revision processes. I'd be putting some effort in to look to explain my understanding of some of the content, and whether that's just in having conversations with peers and colleagues, or doing a little PowerPoint as part of my revision and forcing the family to listen to me explain something to them, or doing a mock exam, whatever it is. It helps you to dig deep back into the grey matter, find the understanding that you've been working on developing, pull it out and articulate it, explain it, so that it makes sense to somebody else. And if you can do that, then you're in good shape for your exam.
Well, this leads nicely, Bren, into the next question, which is about learning methodology and the idea that some formats require more independent study than others, such as the online or distance offerings. What would be your advice to someone, say, studying the NEBOSH General Certificate in the online formats, who would maybe be slightly more apprehensive than other learners regarding their assessment or exam period?
Interesting question. Yeah, I think the general advice we just worked through on the previous question factors in here as well. But if we're looking specifically at online learners, self-study, independent self-study can be challenging for many learners, because you do lose to a degree, or can lose anyway, the social aspect of learning. And for most people, learning is a social activity. We learn from other people, we learn with other people. What we try to do, obviously, with online courses is create opportunities for those conversations to happen through things like the LinkedIn learning community, and through contact with the tutor as and when you should require it, if you're struggling to get your head around a particular point of content. But other than that, if I was working specifically through an online course, the understanding that the course is designed against a syllabus with learning outcomes and assessment criteria, and that's the starting point. When I'm studying element 1 of the course, I'll look at the learning outcomes, the assessment criteria. That's what, if we're focusing on NEBOSH, that's what NEBOSH want us to get out of that content, and that determines what they are allowed to assess us on in the examination. So looking at the learning outcomes, looking at the assessment criteria, working through the content, and at the end of working through that content, challenging yourself to determine whether you've actually addressed the learning outcomes, and you are walking away, metaphorically, with the understanding you need, and that you would be able to answer questions that the examiner throws at you. Now, the way the online course is designed, there are 3 levels of formative assessment within there. There are little knowledge checks, little multiple choice checks at the end of each sort of topic. There are more detailed, longer format opportunities to answer questions and compare your answer to a model answer, I guess. And there is a mock exam there as well. And I think, engaging with all of the levels of formative assessment, and especially looking at the mock exam, and take the opportunity to submit a mock exam, take the opportunity to get some feedback from a tutor on what your technique is currently looking like, and maybe you'll get a pointer or two that will help you refine your approach, that'll put you in much better shape when you actually get to the assessment proper. Which sort of ties in with my final point there, which is sort of should be my first point. Know your enemy, basically. Know what it is you are preparing for. Know what an exam paper looks like. Know what the scenario looks like. Know what sort of things NEBOSH typically challenge learners on. And if you go through the mock process as well, then like I said, understanding what they're expecting from you by way of an answer as well, and that should put you in pretty good shape then by the time you get to the assessment proper.
So do your homework, quite literally there. Thank you, Bren. My next question is, quite frankly, we've touched on the online format and how to maximise, learner success there. But there is, the Astutis exclusive virtual classroom, and it, as we've discussed before in previous podcasts that you and I have done, that infuses the kind of structured traditional learning kind of methodology of classroom learning with the flexible control that you would get from kind of more digital online learning. How would you go about kind of offering advice to our virtual learners?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I love virtual learning. I think, I'm as comfortable now having a conversation with you screen to screen as I would be, having a conversation face to face to you in the coffee room or whatever. I'm used to communicating in this way now, and I think, as a result of those almost forgotten lockdowns, I think most people are now very, very comfortable with the technology and with communicating through, Teams for us, or Zoom, or WebEx, or whatever it might actually be. So when we design a virtual classroom, we are looking to use the technology to approximate what we can actually achieve in a real classroom. We couldn't do that for a year or so, not too long ago. So we had to find ways of using the technology to approximate it, and the technology has moved on quite a lot over the last 2 years or so, and I think we've got pretty much all of the tools that we would want now, in terms of doing breakout exercises, sharing content, sharing information, and so on. General advice, I guess, is you've got to be confident with the technology and with having a chat through a computer monitor rather than face to face. But I think most people are there now. But you've got to engage, you've got to embrace the process, really. Speaking from this side of the camera as a tutor, there's nothing more upsetting than starting a course full of enthusiasm that you're going to have a great day, and more than half of the learners haven't bothered to switch their cameras on. I mean, on some cases, learners don't switch their cameras on at all, and you're just looking at a screen of nothingness. Being able to look at each other, being able to have a chat, with a smile on your face and a twinkle in your eye or whatever, is part of the process. So how can a tutor know whether you're engaged? How can a tutor know whether you're enjoying the experience, whether you're getting your head around key points if they can't actually see you? So engage, keep your camera on, make sure you've got a good, quiet, comfortable area, for your attendance where you're not going to be disrupted. I'm sure there's ongoing challenges from work, but if you can leave the emails alone, leave your phone on silent for the 6.5 hour shift, and actually, enjoy the course, fully engage with it, commit to it, make sure you get the most out of it. You drive your own learning to an extent, but enjoy the experience. Talk with the other learners, have those chats. All right, you're doing it through a computer screen, but it's still nice having a chat with new people. Pick their brains, share ideas, help each other with your learning. And you've got access to a very experienced, well-qualified tutor for 5 solid days, So make sure you pick the brains of the tutor along the way, as well as during the course. At the start of the day, you can find 5 minutes to ask a question. At the end of the day, maybe hang back and ask any questions, things that you're not sure of. If you don't want to ask a question that you might feel is a little bit embarrassing. I mean, there's no such thing as a stupid question on a training course. We all ask things that we should all be prepared to ask things that we're not clear on. No shame or embarrassment in that. I ask lots of silly questions all of the time as part of the process. But engage, speak to the people, commit to doing the homework, get your homework in. You mentioned this on the last question. You've got to do your homework, get your homework in, get it marked, get the feedback, and adapt, modify, refine, continually improve over the course of the course, so that by the time you come out of the back end of the course, you're confident, you're feeling that you've not just learned some good health and safety stuff that you can take back to the day job, but you are fully understanding of the challenge ahead in terms of the exam, and you can go into that confident that you're going to smash it. So perfectly doable in a virtual classroom environment. And our results and our feedback are smashing, but it does require the learners to buy into the approach and to commit to it. The blank sort of video screens, I equate that to back to the classroom. If people drove into the course on their motorbikes and walked into their classroom with their crash helmets still on and never took their helmets off or raised their visor for the day, I'd find that quite disconcerting. And similarly, I find it quite strange when you book time for a course and you're there. It says on the screen that you're there, but you're not present. You're not there. You're not geared up to get the most out of the process, out of the experience. So yeah, that's all I would say is it's a good process. It's proven to work. But from the learner side, you've got to commit to it. You've got to play your part, and you've got to be prepared to drive your learning yourself to a certain extent.
So, Brent, we've covered looking at the different kind of learning methods so far, but there are some rather specific elements of some courses in the examination / assessment process. And I'd like to cover just for a moment the open book exam process. And I know several of the courses that we offer do have a featured OBE, as we call them. What would be your advice to those learners?
Okay, well, we've already mentioned, understand your enemy, know your enemy. You need to understand what the exam looks like, what it feels like before you get there. So that's important. With NEBOSH, the open book exams are a particular type of open book exam. They are scenario-based assessments. That's the other language that NEBOSH use. So you're given a scenario. You're given maybe 2 or 3 pages of text, of information. It'll tell you a little bit about an organisation, about a workplace, about what's going on, and then you get asked a series of questions which require you to apply your knowledge to that scenario and demonstrate that you're able to do that. So it's a very different assessment than the pre-pandemic NEBOSH exams, which were very much a test of memory. This isn't a test of memory because it's open book. You can look stuff up, but it is a test of deeper understanding. It is a better test of your understanding of the content and your ability to apply that understanding to a simulation, to a pretend scenario that will give us a feel as to whether or not you could actually do this in the day job, in the real world. There's an awful lot of information within Astutis course contents. However, you're studying, we prepare our learners for that assessment. We demystify the process, so you won't be wondering what it's about by the time you get there. And NEBOSH, to their credit, given the changes they had to make during the pandemic, have created an awful lot of resources, all available through their website and their YouTube channels. I've messed one up now, Toby. Yeah, so there's a lot of information out there, a lot of resource within your Astutis course materials and from NEBOSH on their website and through their YouTube channel. So probably haven't got enough time to deviate into a masterclass on exam technique here, but it is worth saying that there is a lot of information there within your course and directly from NEBOSH as the examining body. So, familiarise yourself with that, make sure that you do understand what is expected. But at a headline level, it's important that you take a fair bit of time to get your head around the scenario. 3 pages of text takes some reading, takes some thinking about, takes some understanding. So it's going to need a few reads before you start your first question, and it's going to need to be reread for every question because you're going to need to apply your knowledge to the scenario to answer each question. So you'll be very, very familiar with that scenario by the end of that process. But basically, like I said, without going into exam technique too much here, you are looking to make a point to earn a point, and you are when you're making that point, looking to explain the point that you're making to show your understanding, and to pull in some evidence from the scenario as well to show how you are applying your understanding to that scenario. So NEBOSH use a delightful little acronym PEE. So make your point, explain your point, and evidence it with content from the scenario. And that's the process basically. Like I said, there's lots of examples of past papers, sample papers, and the mock exam within the course that learners can familiarise themselves with and help with their understanding and demystifying of the process.
Thank you, Brent. I generally didn't know that. And on that, there is another rather specialist kind of exam or assessment that learners might have to do in certain courses, and that, of course, is the workplace risk assessment. Now, as you're aware, we receive an awful lot of questions from our learners regarding the risk assessment. What is your advice, per se, to those learners who need to complete a risk assessment to pass their course? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, Toby, the first thing is you need to understand what a risk assessment is, and you need to understand how to do a risk assessment. So if when you were studying it, you weren't clear on anything, then certainly take the opportunity to revisit the content and reacquaint yourself with the process, with the key terminology. You need to know what a hazard is. You need to know how to evaluate risk by thinking about the likelihood of harm occurring and the severity of the consequences should it occur. You need to be able to apply hierarchies of control in terms of coming up with an appropriate framework for control as part of the the risk management aspects. So you need to be able to do that. Mentioned earlier, get involved in real life risk assessment in the workplace as well. Learning through doing, have a go, get stuck in, do some real risk assessments. At that point, you're comfortable with risk assessment, and if you're not, then you ask for whatever help or support you're going to need until you are comfortable with risk assessment. So now we've got a learner who's able to do a good risk assessment. We need to convert that learner now into a learner who's going to pass the NG2 or IG2 assessment. So once you're good at risk assessment, park that up a little bit, because what is excellent in your own workplace might not meet the requirements of the examiner. So it's an academic course. The assessment process is approved. There are rigid sort of ways of marking these things that are laid down, and when you're looking to complete your NG2 or IG2 and submit it, the best advice I can give you is follow the rules, stick to the recipe, stay on the path. NEBOSH provide very detailed guidance. They provide a sample paper. It's not a great sample paper, but it's a sample paper that we can benchmark against. And what we see is that there are learners that can apply themselves, can focus, can follow the recipe, can dot all of the I's and cross all of the T's, and they will be successful first time. Whereas that is challenging for some learners, to keep that level of focus, to keep your head into that level of detail. And it really is I dotting and T crossing. There are bullet point prompts throughout the paperwork that you have to deliver upon, and if you don't deliver upon them, you will be held to not have met a particular criterion, and if you fail on any individual criterion, you fail the whole assessment. So it's quite a draconian sort of approach to marking for that NG2 IG2, and it really is important that learners stick to the script, and it does require a fair bit of application of effort to stay in that level of detail, not deviate from the advice, and to be able to deliver something that is going to meet all of the assessment criteria and enable the examiner to pass you first time. What we do find is a lot of learners who do fail first time fail on something that's relatively minor, that's relatively trivial, and it's not because they didn't understand risk assessment, it's because they couldn't keep the requisite level of focus, and they've just drifted off a little bit and missed a little bit over here or missed a little bit over there, and that's been enough to cause them to fail the assessment. So ultimately, that's all I can really say is there's plenty of information there to enable you to pass your NG2 or IG2 first time. But there are lots of minor little reasons why people fail. So keep your head in the detail, follow the instructions. If there's anything you're struggling with, ask for clarification. We can't work with you on an assessment. It's got to be your own work. But if you've got a question, if there's something you're not understanding, if there's something you want clarifying, by all means get in touch, and one of the tutorial team will look to support.
Well, that is just about it for this first episode for our NEBOSH exam podcast on the Health and Safety Digest. A big thank you to Mr. Brenig Moore for stopping by the pod. There will be episode 2 coming very, very shortly, and we'll be covering off specialist courses, how to really maximise your chances of success in those more niche courses. We'll be offering advice in the run-up to the exam, how best to approach, and especially the night before is covered in that episode. What will happen after the exam, and what happens if you sadly do fail the exam. All of that will be covered in our next episode. So until then, you can find us, just type in Astutis on social media. You can have a look on our website. There will be some more specialist blogs on how to approach your exams coming up in the coming weeks. Until then, thank you very, very much. Stay safe.